Pilgrimage is considered a sacred journey, usually in the company of others, to a place or places imbued with power and blessings. It's a practice of connecting with the sacred, with sacred spaces and places to be transformed, purified, and shaped in new and potent ways. I believe the practice of pilgrimage has the potential to transform our understandings of ourselves, others, and even reality itself. Encountering the sacred in our lives and learning how to view every aspect of our lives as sacred can shift the very ground on which we stand. When I lived in Bhutan, one of the things that surprised me was that in addition to the longer traditional pilgrimages that everyone aspired to do, there were also everyday mini pilgrimages taking place all the time. In fact, every weekend, families would pack a picnic lunch, put on their finest clothes, and hike to the nearby temples or monasteries to pay homage to the teachers and the places. The entire adventure was conducted with good humor, playfulness, and delight at the sheer pleasure of being together and engaging with the sacred. Pilgrimage was simultaneously ordinary and profoundly sacred. And as I observed this and occasionally participated, I began to consider how it might be possible to bring these practices of traditional pilgrimage into our everyday lives. These talks are my attempt to share my conclusions with all of you. So first, let's talk about what a pilgrimage is. Pilgrimage is a powerful practice for breaking down fixations and centralization on the self. It is a practice which harnesses our physical bodies, our different ways of communicating, and our patterns of thought and emotion to dismantle and relax habitual ways of seeking comfort, security, and assurance for this idea of me and mine. It's really the best example I know of taking meditation off the cushion and into the world. Pilgrimage is considered a sacred journey, usually in the company of others, to a place or places imbued with power and blessings. It's a practice of connecting with the sacred, with sacred spaces and places to be transformed, purified, and shaped in new and potent ways. Pilgrimage often includes experiencing obstacles along the way, obstacles which, instead of being seen as hindrances, are instead viewed as opportunities for transformation and for purification. I feel that if we can take the same principles that apply on traditional pilgrimages and relate them to daily life, our lives can unfold as transformative and sacred journeys, no matter where we are or where we go. Pilgrimage Unbound is a way to discover the sacred in every moment of our lives. And this practice asks us, how might we live in such a way that we remain tuned into the sacredness of our experience? How can we realize the Dalai Lama's words when he says, "A truly great pilgrim doesn't need to go anywhere"? Now, I would like to share with you some of the characteristics of a pilgrim. We might ask, what is a pilgrim? In my mind, a pilgrim is a wanderer, a person who travels to sacred places, seeking spiritual insight and transformation. In Buddhism, the practice of going on pilgrimage is an extension of the basic idea that we are all pilgrims wandering through samsara until we recognize the true nature of reality and are liberated. A pilgrim is also a renunciant, a person who leaves behind the familiar, comfortable world, her habits and entrenched patterns of reactivity, and goes forth into groundlessness with the trust that there is something beyond these habitual ways of being and acting. A pilgrim is also a refugee, one who takes refuge in liminal spaces, in the unknown and the unformed. And liminal spaces are defined as places of transition, waiting, and not knowing. It's in liminal space where transformation can take place if we learn to wait, to listen, and to let it touch us. Finally, I would say that a pilgrim is a devotee, a person who practices to see the sacred in every experience, every place, and in everyone she meets, even in obstacles and hardships that may arise. In Tibetan Buddhism, the word for pilgrimage is nekor. This compound word consists of two words, ne and kor. Kor means to circle around, to circumambulate. And in a much more subtle sense, it sometimes means to stay close to and to respect. The word ne, when used as a noun, means a sacred place, an empowered place where blessings reside. And when ne is used as a verb, it means to abide, to reside, or to dwell. To come home, you could say, to the raw, uncomplicated, and simplest dimension of our being, the nature of our heart-mind. Together, these two words suggest that ultimately, a pilgrimage could be viewed as a journey taken to experience the blessings that are always available to us when we discover how to rest in our own Buddha nature. So what, you might ask also, is the purpose of pilgrimage? Just as in meditation practice, the purpose of going on pilgrimage is to be transformed, to be awoken to ourselves in a new and profound way. And pilgrimage also functions to break down our fixations and habits of self-focusing and self-cherishing. Engaging on pilgrimage retrains us from seeking comfort and familiarity to being willing to take risks and to encounter aspects of ourselves that have been dormant or hiding. Pilgrimage leads us into recognition of and communion with the sacred. And by virtue of this recognition, becoming someone different in our relationships with ourselves, others, and the phenomenal world. What do I mean when I use this word, sacred? Sacred, as I'm using it here, is a way of perceiving every part of our experience without conceptual mediation or fabrication. Sacred means seeing things as they are, in their own right, without the veils of thought and desire, hope, fear, and expectation that usually obstruct our capacity to connect directly with reality. The idea of the sacred is that when we can experience things as they are, we may discover that they are imbued with power and energy that can transform us. Encountering the sacred has to do with what kinds of relationships we have to whatever we experience. Experiencing the sacred arises in relation to how we view ourselves, others, and the world. Do we view the world as an extension of our ideas and thoughts? Or, as I think we all do from time to time, do we occasionally tap into experiences of present moment wakefulness, in which the thinking mind takes a back seat, and we sense our interconnectedness and intimacy with everything? Perhaps you've had that experience when you stood at the edge of the ocean with the waves and the vast open space, or perhaps when you allowed the idea of I to dissolve when listening to a beautiful piece of music. To illustrate better what I mean by sacred, let me tell you a short story. Some years ago, two Tibetan Buddhist masters were sitting side by side outside on the slope of a mountain. In front of them and down the slope a little ways was a large aspen tree that was shimmering in the wind and the sunlight. The two masters sat in silence for a long time. Finally, one of them leaned over to the other one and said, "They call that a tree." And the two of them burst into uproarious laughter. The point of this story is to show that our thoughts and the labels we assign to phenomena cannot possibly capture them in their fullness, their power, majesty, and vividness. But if we can drop the thinking mind from time to time, we all have the capacity to directly experience reality as it is. When we remain present to things as they are in each moment, we discover their sacred and transformative nature. We have mundane, ordinary relationships with our lives when we live only from our ideas, labels, and thoughts about how these should or shouldn't be. But we can have a sacred relationship to our lives when we practice encountering everything directly, from our hearts instead of our heads, from our deepest nature, our innermost being that naturally recognizes our interconnectedness and intimacy with all phenomena. So in this sense, the practice of pilgrimage Unbound is a way of training ourselves to experience the sacred everywhere, in our bodies, our homes, our workplaces, schools, towns, cities, natural environments, in other people, and everywhere else. Thank you so much for joining me today where we talked about pilgrimage Unbound. We explored what a pilgrimage is and what its purpose is. We also discussed the characteristics of a pilgrim and the possibility of bringing the view of the sacred into our everyday experience.